Welcome back to another edition of Political Breakfast here on WABE, and we are always glad to have you here with us listening. With me today are our strategists, Democratic strategist Tharon Johnson and Republican strategist Brian Robinson. Hello to both of you and happy Monday.
It is a happy Monday. We got a Falcons win. We got an exciting, just unbelievable Jackets and Dogs win this weekend. I did not have a productive weekend in any way other than just absorbing as much football as possible, and it was glorious. I had my best friend in town who is a Clemson fan, so that's why I went to the Tech game, because he came into town to see Clemson.
Boy, what a game that was, right?
Oh, it was so exciting.
Oh, my gosh.
It was great. It was great. They really need to up their food offerings, I'll say that, at Georgia Tech.
I guess
the
day has come where you got to get used to.
I was in the sun. And their concourses are very squeezed. It was, so people were getting out of the sun back there. That's my only complaint. It was a great game, though, a lot of fun, and Georgia Tech was a great host.
Yeah, shout out to the Dogs, who also had a close win. I was actually out of town watching the game. I went to social media and was trying to be quiet in this hotel rooftop and not scream, but they won. And then big shout out to the Falcons. That game was still a little frustrating, but frustrating in the sense of, we went down there 3 times in the red zone, had to kick field goals. But I think the new field goal kicker is definitely the bright spot, is a rock star now, because he didn't miss. Koo definitely missed some kicks. And then I think that, B-Rob, we got to give a shout out to Georgia Tech, man. I know we both Dog fans. We got a lot of Georgia Tech listeners. But for them to beat Clemson and Mayor Dickens, who
that was
we
major.
all know is a proud graduate of Georgia Tech, is repping them. And then I'm going to say this. The governor went to social media and said, let's prove the Atlanta Journal-Constitution wrong. I think there was an opinion piece or something that said that don't bet on the Yellow Jackets, the Dogs, and the Falcons to all win this weekend.
Yeah.
And actually, that was wrong. So the governor, he put it up a few minutes before the game started, Falcons game, but he said, let's prove them wrong. So the AJC got that one wrong. But shout out to those 3 teams for winning this weekend.
Yeah. It was so great. So great. And that new kicker is from Peachtree City. It's a shout out to our Fayette County listeners. You got one of your own doing great.
What's his name, B-Rob?
Let
me look it up.
I was great back and forth with the Emmys too, so I really wasn't all that tuned in.
Well, we should know his name. Yes, we'll come back to you, brother. We'll get you the shout out.
Great shaker. It was nice to have some feel good football and a nice weekend after the week we had last week. And of course, I'm referring to the assassination of Charlie Kirk. We reacted differently, all of us, and just wondering what your thoughts were today about that.
Well, it really is capturing the zeitgeist of America. And it's just another reminder that we have sort of lost this human commonality to see people celebrate a murder. And I know I want to make very clear, I'm not saying all Democrats are on social media celebrating Charlie Kirk's murder or even just thinking it privately. But there's some people who feel like it's okay to go out in public and celebrate a father of 2, a husband, still very young in life, somebody who is making a difference in this country, whether you like him or not, and celebrating his murder in this sniper style is disgusting. And I was disgusted when my side mocked, made fun of, had conspiracy theories about the attack on Paul Pelosi when someone broke in trying to kill the former speaker in their home in San Francisco. I don't feel like we had this sort of celebration when the Minnesota legislators were killed this summer by someone going after Democrats. But of course, they weren't big names the way that Charlie Kirk is. My only appeal, and Tharon and I want to be very clear to people, I think this is part of the story. Tharon and I are very hesitant to talk about these stories. We're not known for being polemicist or going out there on the edge of issues, nor are we national figures. But we do talk about public policy, and we are partisans. He pulls for Democrats, I pull for Republicans. And you just don't know when you're out there talking and you're trying to have a civil dialogue, which is our underlying and motivating purpose of this show. You just don't know who's out there. And y'all have been with me in public through the years when we've done live events. You've seen sort of the emotional reaction that I get from, left-leaning audiences who boo and heckle even fairly mainstream Republican ideas. So I understand just how tribalized this entire thought process has become on both sides, and it's very concerning. And I simply don't know how we break through it. And I don't know how, particularly when social media is so pervasive, and that's where people get their news. I had a dear friend's wife start screaming at me at dinner on Saturday night, screaming at me.
Why?
She's in this liberal echo chamber getting news. And what she is being fed is stuff that's dehumanizing about Charlie Kirk. And it was a very limited amount of knowledge about this guy, but she was just kind of spewing hate. And I'm not even a big Charlie Kirk guy. I know who he is. I don't normally follow him. But I was just taken aback by it and was floored by it. So
what is this going to do for freedom of speech when it particularly comes to you two, when it comes to civilly debating some of the issues that we talk about here on Political Breakfast?
Lisa, I'm glad you brought up the fact that we went live the morning after we were all like the world witnessed a assassination of Charlie Kirk. I mean, that's, you could not go on any network on your phone, TVs, audio, and not hear the response, but more importantly, seeing an assassination, a bullet, going through his neck. And so, yeah, I mean, Lisa, look, what does it do for freedom of speech is that I was much more brave to talk about it that morning after because we had to, right? So I think it comes down to responsibility. Let's start there. You, Lily, me, Brian, we all have a responsibility, right? We literally come on this podcast every week to try to state our opinions. It's usually based on factual information that we've gathered from our sources, things that we read. And then we take all that information and then we try to package it up in a way that it makes viewers want to be entertained by it. Entertained in a way meaning like, I'm so glad Brian said that, or I'm glad Tharon pushed back on that. I'm glad, Lisa, was able to bring that topic up. I think as far as the freedom of speech, yes, the First Amendment gives us the opportunity to voice our opinions and say what we mean. And Brian, you just went through that at your dinner. I'm not talking to anybody about this that I think may disagree with me on it. But here's the problem, Lisa. We got to talk about it. Everyone wants to talk to me about it. So all weekend long, I would not discuss it.
Really?
And I hate, because I knew that I was going to either say something that was going to hurt that person's feeling or they were going to say something that was going to upset me. Now, that's not the way forward, though. So let's move forward, right? So we got to do what Pastor Warnock said, and that is that we do have to admit, and Brian just did this, right? Most people in this business, particularly if you have a podcast or if you have some type of following, you've got to be a little edgy. You got to be able to say things that people want to hear. And a lot of times it's things that people just want validation. They want credit to basically be able to say, hey, I'm not the only person in the world that thinks this. But we can't ignore the fact that there were just some things said during his Charlie Kirk's time that fired up the right. That made them happy, that somebody was speaking a truth that they believe, but it also was offensive to some folks. And, we've said some things on this podcast that could be interpreted that way. So, Lisa, yeah, I don't know what we do. I would tell you, and, we talked about this before we start taping, I'm going to be very careful. I'm going to be very cautious. I am concerned about being at public events, doing what we've historically done. B-Rob and I we stood up in front of some folks in Amelia Island, and Brian knows I'm not lying. What, Brian? 96, 97% white audience, 90% white men. It didn't take me long to do the math. That I'm with some brothers and sisters who don't think the way I think.
Yeah.
And so I guess what's happened, that was shortly thereafter, right? That was, correct me if I'm wrong, that was Friday morning, Brian, and we had just done live Thursday morning on here. So, Lisa, what has transpired over the weekend is now on a Monday, I think we have to be a little bit more cautious and don't do anything that's going to hurt ourselves and hurt our family, because we just don't know what's going to happen next. We are hearing that there are groups out here right now that are upset, as Brian has pointed out, that people are saying negative things about Charlie Kirk in social media and public. There's also another segment of people who don't think that people are saying enough bad things about him, right? You need to be saying more. Some elected officials are getting criticized for offering thoughts and prayers, and let's unite. Let's all lead with love and happiness and unite in civility. So, Lisa, I think it's more of our tone has got to be one that's uniting. Mm-hmm. If you notice, Brian and I haven't really gone back and forth on this a whole lot intentionally, because I do think that the country is at an inflection point right now. We're very divided, and I am very concerned, Lisa, about what the reaction is going to be from this point on. I think the people who are followers and supporters of what Charlie Kirk was saying is going to get more emboldened. It is a rallying call. It's a movement. And then there's also going to be a movement to stop. But I tell you this, many more people are talking about Charlie Kirk's podcast and language on my side being the Democratic side and folks that I talked to than ever before. And it is this echo chamber. It is being fed to us by different media outlets. And so I think you'll start seeing the media outlets be a little bit more responsible about who they actually choose to talk about this. And people who talk about it got to be more responsible, because we don't want violence. And again, I'll say this, my hearts and prayers, my condolences go out to his wife and his 2 kids. I'm also a father of 2 kids. I'm a husband. No one should be murdered for using their First Amendment rights to say something that we don't like. And political violence, and it's happened on both sides. And I'm glad you said that, Brian. In Minnesota, we didn't see this type of response. I mean, now we see a response from this president and this vice president in this nation that's different. Not saying it's right or wrong. It's just different. And I think it's also that it was carried out on a college campus. There's video to see it. But we can't ignore the fact that what happened in Minnesota was also a brutal assassination, murders of multiple individuals who also had a right for freedom of speech. And they were elected and got murdered partly because of that, if not fully because of their jobs and what they chose to be supportive of.
And I'll get into kind of maybe the political implications of this in a little bit, but I want to tack on to what Tharon said there just a bit about the First Amendment. I want to remind folks, none of these folks who've been fired have had their First Amendment rights violated. No one's been put in prison because they celebrated Charlie Kirk's murder on social media. Some have lost their jobs. Yeah. And there's a difference. The private sector can say, this employee has said something that's an embarrassment to our organization, that hurts our business model, that does not reflect our values. That's perfectly fine, right? And I do think that we can have a discussion about what in our society, taking out the First Amendment, because again, no one's going to prison for attacking Charlie Kirk or celebrating a murder, but people are being fired. We can have a discussion about what we as a society think is okay. I think it's perfectly fine for Tharon and other Democrats to say, here are some things that Charlie Kirk said through the years that I find hugely objectionable. I have no problem with that whatsoever. I do have a problem, and I do not want to associate with people who celebrate a murder, because to me, that is hurting this one thing that outside of my faith and my family means more to me than anything, and that's my country. And I think my side does it too, and I think we all need to step back. I've been concerned about the "we are at war" rhetoric. Look, that might get clicks and that might drive viewership, but boy, none of us want a civil war. It is nothing but misery that comes out of having a violent reaction to what's going on. We still have more in common than what we have in our differences. Let's focus on that as much as we can and avoid violence and avoid even this discussion of the need for violence as much as possible.
Real quick, Lisa, I have to say this. I turned to someone this weekend that I won't say their name because they didn't give me permission to, but this individual who knew Congressman John Lewis very well said to me, Tharon, this is not the first time we've actually witnessed assassinations in this country. We've had presidents that have been assassinated. We've had presidents, lieutenants. You could say Martin Luther King Jr. was more than a lieutenant. He was a general of a movement. We've had elected leaders, we've had innocent people, children, all have been like my point is, after all these assassinations and these murderers, what this person told me was, how did the country react? And it's going deeper into what B. Rob is saying. There was a sector of the country that said, you know what, we can't respond to the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. with violence. But remember, there was a whole nother sector of people, Malcolm X and others, who said, no, by any means necessary, we need to respond. But then there was the other sector that said, no, nonviolence is the way, right? The nonviolent, peaceful protest. What I think we got to understand is that these political assassinations have been happening in our country for decades. And it's all about why they happen, but it's also what do we do when they happen? And Brian, I would say this, that I agree. We got to tone down this weird war, right? Because you and I are both doing that right here. But we can't ignore the fact that there's hate in this country. And there are people out there that are concocting a assassination plan or a murder plan on people in different sectors. But when that person reminded me of that, this is a country that has been going through this for a very long time. And this one is different for a lot of different ways, but it's not much different than the other ones either, because a lot of commonalities of why the people, and we have to say this too, we still don't know the true motive of the suspected killer, right? Because as we are doing this podcast, he is not talking. I think there's about to be a lot more information that comes out later in the week. So I think once we have that information later in the week, we can then understand the why and how it happened. Because I think a lot of folks wants to know that. Until that happens, a lot of people are speculating. But as I know, we go to the next subject.
It feels like the country's going backwards, doesn't it?
It does, but we've went backwards before. That's why I wanted this person reminded me. We've had all these folks that have innocently, being killed on live television or, in front of folks. And so there are some people, Lisa, who just move on. I mean, I think some folks in this country have already kind of moving on from this, right? But there's a lot of people
as we do now, right?
As we do.
We're too used to it.
We talked about this last week too. It's like Monday is going to be a different story.
But then there's some of us that have to talk about it, right? Because we don't want to move on, because folks need healing. We have a big fan of the show, a woman who came up to me before this happened and said, I had to stop listening to Political Breakfast for a little bit, right? And of course, I encouraged her to come back because I'm terrified, I'm scared. And she knows who she is. And I told her to, start back listening. But watching her tell me that, Lisa, and tell me that and this is an informed, educated person, she said, then I had to stop listening to it because you all were telling me the truth that I did not want to hear.
Oh, wow.
And she said exactly that.
That's great.
Said, we are going backwards in this country.
That's really interesting. Yeah, on that, one thing that we're all kind of in an age bubble. There's not a huge age difference between the three of us here. And so in our lifetimes, we have had this anomaly, and we have been blessed by it. Post Reagan's assassination attempt in the early 1980s, we have had an unusually long stretch of not having political assassinations in our country that spanned most of our three lifetimes. And I think we're kind of coming out of that. And somebody reminded me this weekend that this is more normal to American history than what the last 40 years have been.
Wow.
There was a ton of this in the 1800s, a ton, President Lincoln being one, President Cleveland.
So we had the coasting period.
There were several, I don't know if I said President Cleveland, I don't know if he was shot or not, but there was, several presidents there in the late 1800s. Gerald Ford was shot. George Wallace was shot and paralyzed forever. JFK, RFK, it goes on and on and on, right? And I think, Trump suffered 2 assassination attempts last year. So maybe we're just cycling back into that pattern that is consistent with American history, but one that we should all seek to avoid.
Yeah, but and we have to ask the question, Lisa. I know you're trying to move us on, but the one thing we have to ask ourselves, Brian, and this is on both sides, what's different now? It's these, right? It's now social media.
Social media really takes
the instantaneous 24-hour media cycle that enables one to basically amplify stuff, right?
Gosh.
And to do it. That's been the biggest thing too.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, I have to say, and I know we're doing a job of not being partisan, but if you look at the way the president is responding, President Trump, this was an attack on his movement. Lindsey Graham said that on Meet the Press this past weekend, that I think that, yes, he loved Charlie Kirk, the person. This is one of his top lieutenants. This is a person who he credits for helping him get reelected. and was carrying out a certain part of the movement. And so how he responds, Lisa, and I'm not saying he's responded incorrectly or correctly. A lot of folks in my community feels that he's not taking the correct response. He's not being a little civil with this. But the governor of Utah, we got to shout him out, who's a Republican, is doing everything he can, Lisa, to try to de-escalate this a little bit, but also be transparent with the public. But he and the president, those two leaders, are going to play a pivotal role in how the country conducts itself going forward.
You know, I hate to sound cynical or crass, but this is a political show. And of course, this is a major public event that is something that all voters across the country are tuned into. This has kind of broken through during an era where not much breaks through to everybody on all sides. And we have a statewide election coming up in November. And Democrats are going to be motivated to go vote in many municipal elections, including in the city of Atlanta. So there's going to be a Democrat driver. One thing I'm clued in on here is, will this mobilize and energize Republican voters? As Tharon hears me say all the time when we do public speaking events, fear and anger are the biggest motivators to go show up and vote at the polls. So this is a fear and anger issue. Does it motivate Republicans to show up? We have 2 Public Service Commission incumbent Republicans up for re-election in November, 2 Democrat challengers. So, Republicans who want to honor Charlie Kirk, whose mission was to get people, particularly conservatives, specifically conservatives, engaged in this political process. If they want to honor him, go show up and vote in November and in early voting in October. Be part of your democracy. Show up. Speak up.
Yeah, I think that assassination really shook up a lot of people. And yeah, the last thing they're thinking about, a lot of people is state politics. But you're right. You got to show up and you got to stay focused no matter what side of the aisle you're on, right? You have to pay attention to what's going on in your backyard. We talk about the sign of the times now. Roughly a month after a gunman shot up the Atlanta campus of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, workers are returning to the office, still very apprehensive of, what could happen, at work, comparing it to what almost happened, almost a month ago. So the climate is really, really tenuous right now, would you say?
Very much so. I actually rode by the CDC last week. Lisa was just, like many of us do, pull out your Waze app and you're trying to get through traffic to get to an appointment. Mm-hmm. And I said, let me go the back way, going to the cab.
I love Waze.
Yeah, you love Waze. Well, shout out to Waze. Well,
Takes you
that's
around
the one thing I do consistently.
Yeah.
One day. But no, saw the flowers and the posters and the pictures honoring David Rose. We got to speak his name because that's another one, Lisa, we've kind of moved on from. So seeing those flowers and seeing those pictures and seeing those signs for so many people who were literally celebrating this life. But also it reminded me exactly what you just said, Lisa. Man, this has become a place where someone was also innocently killed, father, husband, military, and folks had to witness that. 500 rounds shot into a bullet. Just like those students at Utah State. Brian heard me say this, and this was, I think, was a turning point in our speech last week, is that I said, nobody's talking about the students. Like, everybody's talking about the killer and his affiliation and who he was doing and Charlie Kirk and who did. But, like, these students have to watch that. With these workers, Lisa, can you imagine going back to WABE 90.1 and knowing that place was shot 500 times, like 500 rounds.
Yeah. The mental
knowing that
anguish.
You work at a facility that literally also has a very polarizing attack going on right now around this conversation, whether or not you should have vaccine. We have our first detected case of measles in Georgia, by the way. Let's not gloss that over. And so I commend those women and men who are going back. Thank you. My piece in Georgia Trend, Brian always likes to pub his piece.
Yeah.
I'm going to pub mine.
That's right.
Is about thanking them. It's going to come out in November. We always do it 2-3 months ahead of time. Mm-hmm. But we don't thank those essential frontline scientists, workers enough. And these are folks who are going to go back to a place that they know that is divided right now. They know that it lacks leadership. It's in chaos. but they have a job to do. They've gotten this training, and it's the service they have to go with. So I know that the CDC is taking some extreme measures to make sure that security is heightened, to make sure that folks feel welcome, folks feel the transparency about how they work and where they work and the conditions of their work would be there. But that's going to be the next thing. We still got to figure out what's the future of the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And we have an acting director of the CDC. So it's still a lot of uncertainty there, Lisa. But thank you to the women and men who are going back. We need you. The country needs you. And I hope that they are doing everything they can to feel safe. And I think the leadership at the CDC got to over-communicate with these workers.
We're going to wrap up this edition of Political Breakfast. Glad you all were there. Tharon, I think you found out the name of that kicker. I think I saw it come across on my text messages a few minutes ago.
John Parker Romo.
Yeah, there you go.
From Peachtree City, Georgia. B-Rob, Virginia Tech, 5'11", 190 pounds.
McIntosh.
Undrafted. I'm going to give him a nickname, JPR. In Atlanta, we like to give folks nicknames. So we're going to start calling them, Lil John or Baby Romo. JPR or something like that. But no, he saved us. Thank you, brother. We appreciate you.
Absolutely.
We appreciate you, John Parker Romo. We speak his name today.
And I think Parker is what he goes by. I think Parker will now be able to afford his own Peachtree City golf cart. Now that he's done this, he's earned his golf cart credentials for Peachtree City.
Okay, bravo. All right, until next time, we'll chat again.